On a cold March morning in 2024, New York authorities were called to a luxurious apartment on the Upper East Side. What they found there would forever change the lives of a family in India and shock Manhattan's international student community. Priya Sharma, a 19-year-old student at Columbia University, had been found dead in circumstances that initially appeared to be a tragic accident. But as investigators delved deeper into her digital life, a dark web of secrets, manipulation, and exploitation began to emerge. Priya's last social media post, published just 48 hours before her death, showed her smiling in an expensive Midtown restaurant wearing a designer dress that cost more than her monthly scholarship. The caption read, "Living the Dream. Juke's blessed life to NYC." What her friends and family didn't know was that behind that perfect image lay a much darker reality. A young dreamer. Priya had arrived in the United States in August 2023, full of hope and determination. The daughter of a public school teacher and a nurse in Mumbai, she had won a partial scholarship to study computer science at the prestigious Columbia University. She was the first person in her family to study abroad, carrying not only her own dreams but the expectations of an entire community that had invested in her education. She was bright, determined, and incredibly hard-working, recalls Rajesh Sharma, her father, in an emotional video call interview from Mumbai. Priya always said she would go to America and do something big. Never imagined that this is how she would make headlines. Priya's first few months in New York were exactly as she had imagined. Her grades were excellent. She had joined the university's programming club, and she had formed solid friendships with other international students. Her video calls home were full of enthusiasm as she described campus life, inspiring professors, and the endless opportunities New York had to offer. But there was a growing problem that Priya tried to hide from her family: money, financial pressure. Despite her scholarship, the cost of living in Manhattan was astronomical for a young woman from a middle-class family in India. The rent for her small room in a shared apartment in Harlem consumed more than half of her allowance. Books, food, transportation, clothes suitable for the harsh New York winter, everything cost much more than she had anticipated. She started mentioning that things were more expensive than she expected, says Mara Patel, her roommate and fellow international student from Nepal. But Priya was proud. She didn't want to worry her family or seem like she couldn't handle independence. To compensate, Priya started working part-time at a coffee shop near campus, which was allowed under her student visa. But even with the extra work, she could barely cover her basic expenses. As she watched classmates from wealthier families enjoy expensive dinners, designer shopping, and weekend trips, Priya felt increasingly isolated and pressured. It was in this state of financial and emotional vulnerability that she met Marcus Wellington, the encounter that changed everything. First contact happened in a seemingly innocent way in October 2023. Priya was studying in the university library when her old, slow laptop finally stopped working during a crucial programming session for an important project. Frustrated and on the verge of tears, she couldn't afford repairs, let alone a new computer. She was approached by a well-dressed man who had observed her situation. "Sorry to bother you, but I noticed you're having trouble with your laptop," he said, introducing himself as Marcus Wellington, a 45-year-old tech entrepreneur. Elegant in his tailored suit and exuding confidence, Marcus offered immediate help. "I know a great repair shop nearby. How about I take a look?" What could have been just a kind gesture from a well-meaning stranger turned out to be the first carefully calculated move by an experienced predator. Not only did Marcus arrange for Priya's laptop to be repaired the same day, something that would normally take a week, but he also refused to accept any payment Consider it a small contribution to education, he said with a warm smile. I love supporting bright young people in their academic journeys. The first seeds of manipulation. In the days following their chance encounter at the library, Marcus began to appear more and more in Priya's life. First, it was a message on Instagram congratulating her on an academic presentation she had mentioned. Then an invitation to coffee, as mentors do with promising students, at a fancy cafe on the Upper West Side. During that first official coffee, Marcus introduced himself as a successful investor in tech startups, someone who had started from scratch and now devoted part of his time to identifying and nurturing young talent. He demonstrated impressive knowledge of Priya's field of study and asked insightful questions about her projects and career ambitions. He seemed genuinely interested in my future, Priya had told her friend Sarah Chen a few weeks later. Not like those guys who only want one thing. Marcus talked about internship opportunities, industry connections, how I could stand out in such a competitive field. Marcus was meticulous in his approach. He never made obvious romantic advances initially. Instead, he positioned himself as a mentor, a protector, someone who understood the unique challenges international students faced. He talked about his own immigrant journey, even though he was a third-generation American, and how he had learned to navigate New York's elite circles, the subtle escalation. During November, Priya and Marcus meetings became more frequent. Always in public and respectable places, fancy restaurants, art galleries, tech networking events. Marcus gradually introduced Priya to a world she had never imagined accessing. Dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants, exclusive events at elite co-working spaces, informal meetings with other young entrepreneurs. For a young woman who had grown up middle class in Mumbai and now struggled to pay for student pizzas, this world was as exciting as it was intimidating. Marcus always insisted on paying for everything, but in an elegant way, never making Priya feel like charity. He had a way of making it all seem natural, recalls Meera, her roommate. Priya would come home with new clothes, talking about important people she had met, incredible opportunities that were coming her way, and it was always, Marcus introduced me to, or Marcus suggested that. Marcus' psychological manipulation was subtle but systematic. He alternated between boosting Priya's self-esteem, praising her intelligence, ambition and unique potential, and creating emotional dependence. He began to suggest that other students and teachers did not truly understand her value, that she was different and special in ways that only someone with his experience could recognize. By December 2023, 3 months after meeting Marcus Wellington, Priya Sharma's life had changed dramatically. What began as occasional mentoring meetings had evolved into something much more complex and dangerous. Although she still could not identify exactly what was happening, it was like watching someone being enveloped by a fog. Mentoring had evolved into something much more complex and dangerous. Although she still couldn't quite identify what was happening, it was like watching someone being enveloped by a fog, described Sarah Chen, one of the few close friends Priya kept during this period. At first, she was just excited to have met someone important. But then gradually she started to distance herself from all of NERM. The first significant change was financial. Marcus had started offering increasingly extravagant gifts, always wrapped in seemingly innocent justifications. A new iPhone because a tech student needs the best tools. An expensive winter coat because I can't let such a talented young woman freeze in New York. Money for books as an investment in her bright future. Each gift came with a rational explanation and a paternal smile from Marcus. He had an impressive ability to make Priya feel special for deserving his generosity while simultaneously creating an emotional debt that she unconsciously felt. The introduction of the apartment. The turning point came in January 2024 when Marcus made an offer that would completely change the dynamics of their relationship. During dinner at a fancy Italian restaurant in Soho, he casually mentioned that he had an extra apartment on the Upper East Side that was just gathering dust. "Indisu Priya, I've been watching how you've been struggling with the living conditions in Harlem," he said, his voice laden with genuine concern. "That apartment is available. It has 24-hour security. It's close to campus. Why don't you consider moving there? It would be much more convenient for your studies." When Priya protested that she couldn't afford the rent for an apartment on the Upper East Side, Marcus waved his hand dismissively. "Don't worry about that. Consider it part of the mentoring program. Young talent needs the right environment to flourish." The apartment was everything Priya had dreamed of: spacious, modern, with a view of Central Park. Compared to the cramped little room she shared in Harlem, it was like a palace. Marcus arranged for the move at the end of January, insisting on paying for furniture and even a new wardrobe, suitable for professional networking. The isolation begins with the move to the new apartment. Marcus subtly introduced rules and expectations that began to isolate Priya from her previous support systems. He suggested she spend less time wasting energy on people who don't understand her ambitions and more time focusing on real opportunities for growth. "He never directly told her to stop seeing us," recalls Meera Patel, her former roommate. But suddenly Priya was always busy with some important event Marcus had organized. She always had a new excuse for not showing up to our usual get-togethers. Marcus also began introducing the idea of professional discretion. He explained that given his status in the business community, it was important that his mentoring program not be misinterpreted by people who didn't understand complex professional relationships. Priya should keep their meetings and her new living situation private, especially from her family in India. "You don't want your parents to worry unnecessarily," he argued. "They may not understand how professional connections work here in the United States. It's better to spare them the confusion." The first intimate request. In February 2024, Marcus finally revealed the true nature of what he was building. During an evening at his apartment, a Tribeca penthouse that cost more in monthly rent than Priya's family earned in a year, he made his first direct request. "Priya, you are a beautiful and intelligent young woman," he said as they poured expensive wine after dinner. "And I am a man who appreciates beauty and intelligence. We have a special connection, don't we? Why don't we explore that more deeply?" When Priya hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the change in direction, Marcus immediately changed tactics. He didn't press her physically, but emotionally. He talked about how he had invested in her, about the incredible opportunities that were yet to come, about how special people like them had relationships that were different from the conventional. "I'm not talking about anything sorted," he reassured her, sensing her resistance. "I'm talking about a mature, mutually beneficial relationship. You continue to focus on your studies. I continue to provide support and guidance, just with a more personal dimension." The escalation of control. After that conversation, the dynamic between Marcus and Priya changed irreversibly. Although she did not immediately agree to his more intimate requests, Marcus had planted the seed of a new reality. He began to be more explicit about his expectations in exchange for his support. He established regular times for them to meet. Initially, these were innocent dinners, but they gradually evolved into expectations that she would spend entire nights at his apartment. Marcus developed an elaborate system of emotional rewards and punishments based on her availability and appreciation. She started mentioning that Marcus got upset when she wasn't available, says Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, a counselor at the Columbia Mental Health Center that Priya had briefly sought out in March. She described feelings of guilt when she disappoints someone who has done so much for her. These are classic signs of psychological manipulation. Marcus also introduced an element of surveillance disguised as care. He installed security apps on Priya's phone, supposedly for her protection as a young woman living alone in Manhattan. He wanted to know where she was, who she was talking to, how she spent her time when they weren't together. The financial aspect intensifies. February turned into March. Marcus became more direct about the transactional aspect of their relationship. He began giving Priya regular allowances, initially $2,000 per week, then increasing to $3,500 in exchange for her company and discretion. "It's just recognition for your time," he explained. "Successful people value quality relationships, and you deserve to be valued." The money was tempting for a student who had struggled financially, but it came with invisible strings attached. Marcus laid down rules about how the money should be spent, insisting that she buy certain clothes, frequent certain beauty salons, and maintain certain standards of appearance that he approved of. He also began to use the money as a form of emotional control. If Priya questioned any of his demands or tried to maintain boundaries, Marcus would become disappointed and reduce or completely suspend his financial support, reminding her of all the opportunities she would be missing out on, the ignored warning signs. During this period, several people close to Priya tried to express concerns, but she had become skilled at deflecting questions. When her family asked about her new expensive clothes and improved lifestyle during video calls, she credited additional scholarships and freelance work opportunities. "We knew something was wrong," said Professor James Mitchell, her academic advisor, who noticed changes in Priya's behavior and priorities. Her grades were still good, but she seemed distracted, stressed. When I asked if she needed any support, she always said everything was fine, that she was just exploring networking opportunities. What no one knew was that Marcus had become increasingly possessive and controlling. He monitored Priya's activities, discouraged relationships he didn't approve of, and gradually created a world where she depended completely on him for validation, financial security, and social guidance. By March 2024, Priya Sharma had become completely entangled in the web carefully constructed by Marcus Wellington. What she didn't know was that other young women had gone through the same process before her and that Marcus had much more sinister plans for the future of their relationship. On March 15, 2024, just 1 week before her death, Priya Sharma made a discovery that would completely change her perception of Marcus Wellington and put her in mortal danger. It all started with a seemingly insignificant mistake. Marcus had forgotten his laptop at her apartment after one of his regular nighttime visits. Initially, Priya had no intention of violating his privacy. He just wanted to return the device when Marcus returned. But when a pop-up notification appeared on the screen, showing a message from a young Asian woman with a profile picture that said, "I need to talk about the money you owe me," her curiosity was piqued. What Priya discovered upon further investigation made her blood run cold. Marcus's laptop contained a meticulously organized folder titled Special Projects, which revealed the true extent of his predatory activities, the multiple victim system. The files revealed that Priya was not even remotely the first young international student Marcus had mentored. Now, in fact, she found evidence of at least 7 other young women over the past 3 years, all international students between the ages of 18 and 22, all from middle-class families in developing countries. Initially approached under the guise of professional mentoring, there were photos, text conversations, detailed financial records, and even intimate videos that Marcus had collected without the young women's knowledge. Relationship followed a pattern almost identical to what Priya had experienced. The casual encounter, the trust-building phase, the gradual isolation, the free apartment, and finally the transition to sexual expectations in exchange for financial support. It was like reading about my own life, but multiplied by 7. Priya later told Sarah Chen during a desperate phone call. Every conversation, every gift, every promise, he had used exactly the same tactics. With all of us. Middish, the fate of the others. Even more disturbing were the discoveries about what had happened to her predecessors. 2 young women had disappeared after trying to confront Marcus about the relationship. One had supposedly returned home due to family emergencies. Another had transferred to a university on the West Coast, but Marcus's records suggested something far more sinister. In text conversations with an unidentified associate, Marcus casually discussed methods for solving problems. When his girls became problematic or uncooperative, there were veiled references to permanent solutions and necessary cleanups. One particularly shocking folder contained documents about Anastasia Volkov, a 20-year-old Russian student, who had been found dead in her apartment 6 months earlier in September 2023. Officially, her death had been classified as an accidental overdose, but Marcus files contained photos of her unconscious and references to experimental dosages of unidentified substances. The blackmail attempt. Priya also discovered that Marcus had installed hidden cameras in her apartment, cameras she never knew existed. He had recorded all her intimate moments, phone conversations with her family, and even her private reactions of distress as she struggled with her situation. These videos were not just for his personal pleasure. Marcus used them as blackmail material. There was evidence that he threatened to send intimate videos to families, universities, and future employers if any of his victims tried to expose him or escape his influence. He had created a perfect system. Detective Michael Torres, who investigated the case, later explained, he specifically chose vulnerable young people from conservative cultures where sexual shame would be devastating. On a gray November morning in 2024, Parisian authorities were called to a luxury apartment in the 8th arrondissement, near the Champs-Élysées. What they found there would forever change the lives of a family in Shanghai and send shockwaves through Paris's international intern community. Mei Lin Chen, a 22-year-old intern at a prestigious French luxury goods company, had been reported missing by her roommate after not returning home for 5 days. When police finally gained access to an apartment registered to a wealthy businessman, they discovered evidence of a young woman's presence, but Mei Lin herself was gone. Her last known location, captured by her phone's GPS before it went dark, placed her at this exact address. Mei Lin's last social media post, published just 1 week before her disappearance, showed her smiling at an exclusive rooftop bar overlooking the Eiffel Tower, wearing a Chanel dress that cost more than 6 months of her intern stipend. The caption read in Mandarin, "Living my Parisian dream." What her friends and family didn't know was that behind that perfect image lay a much darker reality. Mei Lin had arrived in France in January 2024, full of hope and determination. The daughter of a factory manager and an elementary school teacher in Shanghai, she had secured a highly competitive 6-month internship with Maison Beaumont, one of France's most prestigious luxury fashion houses. She was the pride of her family, the first to work abroad, carrying not only her own dreams but the expectations of parents who had saved for years to supplement her meager intern wages. She was brilliant, ambitious, and incredibly hard-working, recalls her father, Chen Wei, in an emotional video interview conducted by Shanghai media. Mei Lin always said she would go to Paris and make something of herself in the fashion world. We never imagined this is how she would make headlines. Mei Lin's first few weeks in Paris were exactly as she had imagined. Her work at Maison Beaumont was challenging but exciting. She assisted with social media campaigns, attended fashion shows, and absorbed everything she could about the luxury industry. Her WeChat messages home were full of enthusiasm as she described Parisian life, inspiring colleagues, and the endless beauty of the city. But there was a growing problem that Mei Lin tried to hide from her family: money. Despite her prestigious internship, Mei Lin's monthly stipend of €600 was barely enough to survive in one of the world's most expensive cities. The rent for her tiny room in a shared apartment in the 19th arrondissement, far from the glamorous Paris of postcards, consumed €500 of that stipend. That left just €100 for food, transportation, phone bills, and the professional wardrobe expected at a luxury fashion house. She started mentioning that Paris was more expensive than she expected, says Lu Ying, her roommate and fellow Chinese intern working at a tech startup. But Mei Lin was proud. She didn't want to worry her family or seem like she couldn't handle independence. She wanted them to believe the dream was real. To compensate, Mei Lin started skipping meals, walking hours instead of taking the metro, and wearing the same 3 outfits in rotation. She watched her wealthy French colleagues, the children of bankers and aristocrats, enjoy leisurely lunches at bistros, weekend trips to the Riviera, and effortless shopping on the Rue Saint-Honoré. The gap between the Paris she was living and the Paris she had imagined grew wider each day. It was in this state of financial and emotional vulnerability that she met Philippe Rousseau. The first contact happened in a seemingly innocent way in March 2024. Mei Lin was at a luxury brand networking event that her company had encouraged interns to attend. Feeling out of place among the champagne-sipping elite in her budget dress, she was standing alone near the bar when a distinguished older man approached. "You look like you're contemplating escape," he said in perfect English, noticing her discomfort. "These events can be insufferable, can't they?" He introduced himself as Philippe Rousseau, a 52-year-old investment banker who specialized in luxury goods acquisitions. Impeccably dressed in a bespoke suit, exuding old money confidence, Philippe had a disarming warmth that immediately put Mei Lin at ease. They talked for nearly an hour, about her internship, her dreams of working in luxury brand management, the challenges of navigating Parisian professional culture as an outsider. Philippe listened intently, asked thoughtful questions, and shared stories of his own career trajectory in ways that made her feel seen and valued. Before parting, he handed her his business card. "If you ever need advice about the industry, or just want to discuss career strategy, don't hesitate to reach out. I enjoy mentoring talented young people." What could have been just a kind gesture from a well-meaning professional turned out to be the first carefully calculated move by an experienced predator. In the days following their encounter at the networking event, Philippe began appearing more frequently in Mei Lin's life. First, it was a LinkedIn message congratulating her on a successful social media campaign she had posted about. Then an invitation to lunch, as mentors do with promising interns, at a refined bistro in the Marais. During that first official lunch, Philippe expanded on his credentials. He claimed to sit on advisory boards for several fashion houses, had connections throughout the industry, and devoted part of his time to identifying and nurturing young talent. He demonstrated impressive knowledge of luxury brand strategy and asked insightful questions about Mei Lin's projects and career ambitions. "He seemed genuinely interested in my future," Mei Lin had told Lu Ying during one of their late-night conversations in their apartment. "Not like those French guys at the office who look at Asian interns like we're temporary novelties." Philippe talked about internship extensions, industry connections, how I could build a real career here. Philippe was meticulous in his approach. He never made obvious romantic advances initially. Instead, he positioned himself as a mentor, a protector, someone who understood the unique challenges Asian professionals faced in predominantly white European industries. He spoke about diversity initiatives, about how he championed talented outsiders, about his belief that the old guard of French luxury needed fresh perspectives. During April, Mei Lin and Philippe's meetings became more frequent. Always in public and respectable settings, elegant restaurants, private gallery viewings, exclusive industry cocktail parties. Philippe gradually introduced Mei Lin to a world she had never imagined accessing. Dinners at restaurants with Michelin stars, where a single meal cost more than her monthly rent. Invitations to Fashion Week events that even her supervisors at Maison Beaumont couldn't attend. Introductions to creative directors, brand executives, and influencers who inhabited the upper echelons of Parisian luxury culture. For a young woman who had grown up in a modest apartment in Shanghai and now struggled to afford metro tickets, this world was as intoxicating as it was intimidating. Philippe always insisted on paying for everything, but in an elegant way that never made Mei Lin feel like charity. "Consider it an investment in promising talent," he would say with a warm smile. "Besides, I can't very well expect Intern to split the bill at Alain Ducasse." He also began solving her practical problems with generous discretion. When Mei Lin mentioned her laptop was dying, Philippe gifted her a new MacBook Pro, essential for modern professional work. When she worried about her limited professional wardrobe, he arranged for her to receive sample pieces from brands he claimed to advise, designer items worth thousands of euros. "He's been so helpful," Mei Lin told Lu Ying in late April, showing off a Celine bag Philippe had given her. "He says he sees real potential in me, that he wants to help me succeed in ways his mentors helped him." Lu Ying had felt uneasy. "Mei Lin, men like that don't give such expensive gifts without expecting something in return. This feels dangerous." But Mei Lin had brushed off the concern. "You don't understand. Philippe isn't like that. He's a professional mentor. He's helping me build the life I came to Paris to find." The shift from mentorship to something darker happened gradually, then suddenly. In early May, Philippe invited Mei Lin to what he described as a small dinner party at his apartment, a stunning Haussmann-era residence near Parc Monceau that overlooked tree-lined boulevards. When she arrived, she discovered there were no other guests. Just Philippe, an elegantly set table for two, and champagne chilling in a silver bucket. "I hope you don't mind," Philippe said smoothly. "The other guests canceled at the last minute. But since I'd already arranged everything, I thought we could still enjoy the evening. Unless you're uncomfortable." Mei Lin hesitated at the threshold, sensing she was crossing some invisible line. But Philippe looked genuinely disappointed. The dinner did smell amazing, and she told herself this was still just professional networking. Wealthy mentors entertained protégés in their homes all the time, didn't they? The evening was seductive in its sophistication. Philippe was the perfect host, attentive but not aggressive, entertaining but not inappropriate. He talked about art, travel, philosophy, making Mei Lin feel intellectually stimulated in ways her intern work never did. The wine flowed freely, expensive bottles that loosened her natural reserve. It was late when Philippe finally made his move, subtle but unmistakable. A hand resting on her lower back as he showed her a painting. Standing unnecessarily close as they looked out at the Paris skyline from his balcony. A compliment about her beauty that crossed from professional to personal. "Mei Lin," he said, his voice lower, more intimate. "You must know how exceptional you are. How drawn I am to you." She should have left then. Every instinct screamed warning. But Philippe was patient, skillful. He didn't push. Instead, he stepped back, apologized for his forwardness, said he hoped he hadn't made her uncomfortable. "I just want you to know that my interest in you goes beyond professional admiration," he said carefully. "But I would never want to pressure you. Your career, your dreams, those are what matter most. I just hope that maybe, in addition to mentorship, we could explore something more." Mei Lin left that night confused, flattered, and frightened. Philippe had been so careful not to threaten her professionally. He'd made it sound like the romantic interest was separate from his willingness to help her career. But the message was clear: accepting his romantic attention would come with continued access to his world. Over the next 2 weeks, Philippe carefully reconstructed the boundaries of their relationship. He stopped contacting Mei Lin for several days, letting her feel the absence of his attention and support. When she finally reached out, ostensibly to thank him for previous introductions, he was warm but slightly distant. "I've been thinking about our last conversation," he said during their next coffee meeting. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I also don't want to pretend I don't have feelings for you. So let me be direct. I would like to continue supporting your career, and I would also like to explore a more personal relationship. But I need to know if you're interested in both." The way he framed it made it sound like Mei Lin's choice, but the underlying calculation was clear. Reject the personal relationship, and the professional support would evaporate. Accept it, and doors would continue opening. Mei Lin was trapped in a web of her own compromised position. She had already accepted expensive gifts, attended exclusive events on his invitation, and allowed her family to believe her Parisian life was successful partly because of luxuries Philippe provided. Going back to her struggles, admitting she'd been foolish, losing access to the world he'd shown her, it all felt impossible. "I care about you too," she finally said, the lie tasting bitter but necessary. "I just want to make sure this doesn't compromise my professional reputation." Philippe's smile was triumphant, though he hid it well. "Of course. We'll be discreet. This is just between us, two adults who enjoy each other's company." From May through October 2024, Mei Lin lived a carefully partitioned existence. Publicly, she was the ambitious intern at Maison Beaumont, working late hours and impressing her supervisors with her dedication. Privately, she was Philippe's kept woman, though neither of them would have used that term. The arrangement, as Philippe called it, had clear parameters. Mei Lin would make herself available when Philippe wanted to see her, typically 3 to 4 evenings per week. She would accompany him to select events as his young colleague, or sometimes not attend events at all, simply waiting in his apartment for private evenings. In exchange, Philippe covered her rent, gave her a generous monthly allowance of €2,000, continued buying her designer clothes and accessories, and promised to facilitate a full-time job offer when her internship ended. To her roommate Lu Ying, Mei Lin claimed she'd received an unexpected scholarship supplement. To her parents in Shanghai, she said Maison Beaumont had increased intern compensation due to her excellent work. On social media, she posted carefully curated images of Parisian glamour, designer outfits, expensive restaurants, cultural events, that suggested success while hiding its true source. But the psychological toll was crushing. Philippe's romantic attention, which had seemed sophisticated at first, revealed itself as possessive and controlling. He wanted to know where Mei Lin was at all times. He became jealous if she mentioned male colleagues. He criticized her appearance, her accent, her manners, always framed as helpful feedback, but designed to undermine her confidence. The sexual relationship, which Philippe had promised would be respectful, became increasingly uncomfortable. He had specific demands, particular scenarios he wanted to enact, that made Mei Lin feel more like a purchased service than a romantic partner. "I don't think I can keep doing this," Mei Lin confessed to Lu Ying one night in October, finally admitting the truth about her relationship with Philippe. "But I don't know how to stop. He's promised me a job. My parents think I'm succeeding. I've spent all the money he's given me. I couldn't even afford next month's rent without him." Lu Ying was horrified. "Mei Lin, this is exactly the kind of situation we were warned about. This man is exploiting you. You need to end this now. Report him if necessary." "Report him for what?" Mei Lin asked bitterly. "I agreed to everything. I took his money. Who would believe I was coerced? I'd just be the Chinese girl who slept her way into the luxury industry and then cried victim when it didn't work out." In early November, something shifted in Philippe's behavior. He became more demanding, more possessive, and strangely paranoid. He accused Mei Lin of seeing other men, of planning to expose their relationship, of being ungrateful for everything he'd provided. During an argument on November 8th, he grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave bruises, something he'd never done before. "You forget what I've done for you," he hissed. "Without me, you're just another struggling intern who'll go back to Shanghai with nothing. I made you. And I can unmake you just as easily." Mei Lin was terrified. She told Lu Ying she wanted to end things, but she was afraid of what Philippe might do. "He knows people everywhere in the industry. He could destroy any chance I have of working in luxury goods. And he has photos, messages, things that would humiliate me if they got out." Lu Ying begged her to go to the police, to her internship coordinator, to anyone. But Mei Lin was paralyzed by shame and fear. On November 12th, Mei Lin received a text from Philippe, Come to the apartment tonight. We need to talk about your future. This is important." She told Lu Ying she would go, have the conversation, and end things definitively. "I'll be back by midnight," she promised. Mei Lin never came home. When Lu Ying reported Mei Lin missing on November 17th, after 5 days of no contact, unanswered messages, and her phone going straight to voicemail, Parisian police initially treated it as a routine missing person case. Young people went off the grid sometimes, especially international students dealing with personal issues. But Lu Ying was persistent. She told police about Philippe, gave them his name and address, explained the nature of the relationship. Reluctantly, investigators went to Philippe's apartment in the 8th arrondissement. What they found there raised immediate red flags. Signs of Mei Lin's presence, her phone charger, items of clothing, her passport hidden in a drawer. But no Mei Lin. The apartment had been recently and thoroughly cleaned, almost professionally so. Philippe himself was calm, collected, and had a lawyer present before police even finished asking preliminary questions. His story was consistent. Yes, he knew Mei Lin. Yes, they had been romantically involved. Yes, she had been at his apartment on November 12th. But she had left around 10 p.m. after an amicable conversation about ending their relationship. He had no idea where she had gone afterward. He seemed concerned, of course, and hoped she would be found safe. Police searched the apartment more thoroughly. They found Mei Lin's luggage, packed as if she'd been planning to travel. They found her laptop, its hard drive wiped clean. They found a substantial amount of cash, Euro 5,000, in an envelope with Mei Lin's name on it. "I was giving her a parting gift," Philippe explained smoothly, "to help her transition back to her regular life. She left it behind, which concerned me. But I assumed she'd return for it once she'd cooled down." What police didn't find was any sign of violence, struggle, or foul play. Philippe's apartment was pristine. Security cameras in the building showed Mei Lin entering on November 12th at 8:47 p.m., but the cameras had mysteriously malfunctioned between 10 p.m. and midnight. Technical issues, the building manager said, that had since been resolved. The case attracted significant media attention, both in France and China. Mei Lin's parents flew to Paris, desperate and devastated. They stayed in budget hotels they could barely afford, spending their days at police stations and their evenings posting flyers around the city. "Our daughter came to France with dreams," Qinwei said through tears at a press conference organized by Chinese community groups. "Someone took advantage of those dreams. Someone knows what happened to her. Please, if you know anything, come forward." French police conducted extensive searches. They dragged the Seine. They searched parks, abandoned buildings, construction sites throughout Paris. They interviewed Philippe repeatedly, searched his apartment multiple times, examined his financial records and phone logs. Philippe cooperated fully, always with his lawyer present. He maintained his story, a brief romantic relationship with a young woman, an amicable ending, no idea what happened afterward. He expressed sympathy for her family and hoped that she would be found. Investigators discovered troubling patterns. Philippe had a history of relationships with much younger women, particularly foreign interns and students. At least 3 other women came forward to describe similar experiences: the mentorship that became romantic, the gifts and financial support, the controlling behavior, the difficulty extracting themselves from his influence. But none of them had disappeared. And none of them accused Philippe of violence. The relationships had been manipulative, exploitative, morally reprehensible, but not obviously criminal. "He's a predator," one former girlfriend told investigators. "But he's a careful predator. He chooses vulnerable targets, isolates them, makes them dependent. But he's always smart enough to maintain plausible deniability." Despite intensive investigation, police could not build a criminal case against Philippe Rousseau. The evidence was circumstantial at best. Mei Lin had last been seen entering his building, but could not be proven to still be there when cameras malfunctioned. The wiped laptop and packed luggage suggested planning, but could support Philippe's story of an intended departure. The cash left behind was unusual, but not proof of foul play. The clean department could be explained as routine housekeeping. No body, no blood, no witnesses, no physical evidence of violence. Philippe's lawyer successfully argued that police harassment of his client was based on classist assumptions about wealthy older men and younger foreign women. Romantic relationships across age and cultural boundaries may be uncomfortable for some, but they are not crimes, his statement read. My client has cooperated fully with this investigation and maintains hope that Ms. Chen will be found safe. By February 2025, the active investigation had effectively stalled. Philippe remained a person of interest but faced no charges. He continued his life largely undisturbed, still working in finance, still attending luxury industry events, still maintaining his elegant lifestyle. Mei Lin's parents remained in Paris for 3 months before financial necessity forced them to return to Shanghai. They left behind a missing person case that was slowly going cold and a hole in their lives that would never be filled. We trusted France, Chen Wei said in his final press conference before departing. We thought it was a civilized country where our daughter would be safe. But this man, this predator, he saw our daughter as something he could use and discard. And your system protects him because he is wealthy and connected, while my daughter is just another disposable foreign girl. The Chinese embassy lodged formal complaints about the investigation's handling. Paris's Chinese student community organized vigils and protests. Social media campaigns kept Mei Lin's story alive in China, where she became a symbol of the dangers young Chinese women faced abroad. But despite international pressure, the case remained unsolved. In the absence of concrete answers, theories multiplied. Some believed Philippe had killed Mei Lin in his apartment during an argument, disposed of her body with professional help during the camera malfunction, and staged the scene to suggest she had left voluntarily. Others thought Mei Lin might have fled on her own, perhaps with Philippe's help or money, to escape shame and start over elsewhere with a new identity. A few conspiracy theorists suggested Mei Lin had been trafficked, sold to networks that preyed on vulnerable foreign women, with Philippe serving as a sophisticated recruiter. The most heartbreaking theory, whispered among investigators but never officially stated, that Mei Lin's body might never be found because it had been disposed of in ways that left no trace, dissolved, cremated, hidden in construction sites in a city constantly rebuilding itself. As of May 2025, Mei Lin Chen remains missing. Her case file is still technically open, but receives minimal attention from overwhelmed Parisian police. Philippe Rousseau continues his life unimpeded, though he has reportedly become more cautious about his social interactions. Mei Lin's parents maintain a Facebook page dedicated to finding their daughter, updated regularly with pleas in multiple languages. Her former roommate Lu Ying graduated from her own internship and returned to China, carrying guilt that she couldn't save her friend. Maison Beaumont, Mei Lin's former employer, issued a brief statement expressing sadness about the situation but declined to comment on their intern supervision practices or how they had failed to notice a vulnerable young employee becoming entangled with a predatory older man. The luxury apartment where Mei Lin was last seen has been sold to new owners who know nothing of its history. The building's security cameras have been upgraded. Technical malfunctions are apparently no longer an issue. And somewhere in Paris, in an evidence locker at a police station, sits a box with Mei Lin Chen's belongings. Her passport showing she had planned to renew it, her phone with its SIM card removed, a Chanel bag that Philippe had given her, and photographs of a smiling young woman in designer clothes, living what appeared to be a dream life in the City of Light. The only physical testimony of a 22-year-old who came to Paris with ambitions and hope, and whose dreams made her vulnerable to someone who understood exactly how to exploit that vulnerability. Mei Lin's story is not unique. Each year, thousands of young people, particularly women, come to cities like Paris, London, New York, seeking opportunities in competitive, glamorous industries. Many arrive with limited financial resources, minimal support networks, and maximum vulnerability. Predators like Philippe Rousseau recognize these conditions as hunting grounds. They offer mentorship that becomes dependence, generosity that becomes control, affection that becomes exploitation. They are sophisticated enough to maintain plausible deniability, wealthy enough to afford excellent legal protection, and connected enough to operate with relative impunity. The question that haunts everyone who knew Mei Lin is simple but unanswerable. Could this have been prevented? If she had been less proud and told her parents about her financial struggles, would they have brought her home before Philippe entered her life? If her internship program had provided adequate living stipends, would she have been less vulnerable to his initial overtures? If Lu Ying had been more insistent earlier, could she have extracted Mei Lin from the situation before it became deadly? If society took seriously the exploitation of young women by wealthy, powerful men, if it were treated as the predation it is rather than dismissed as complicated relationships, would Philippe Rousseau be free today? These questions have no satisfying answers. They only underscore how easily bright young lives can be destroyed when ambition meets exploitation, when dreams encounter predators, when the vulnerable trust those who see them only as prey. Somewhere, Mei Lin Chen's parents wait for news that will likely never come. They wait for a phone call, a sighting, a miracle that will return their daughter to them. But those who investigated her disappearance know the terrible truth. In cases like this, when young women vanish from the apartments of wealthy, connected men, the most likely outcome is that they are gone forever. Their bodies disposed of, their stories silenced, their lives erased as completely as if they had never existed at all. The city of light casts deep shadows. And in those shadows, some people disappear without a trace, leaving behind only unanswered questions, grieving families, and a brutal reminder that the most dangerous predators often wear the most elegant masks.